The rocket launcher has a drop rate of 5.56% from skeleton commandos. This is also the caliber of the 5.56 NATO standard round, though presumably the skeleton does not adhere to NATO standards, or even uses a gun. Terraria guns have no recoil, or primer, or gunpowder. Unless you're using an explosive round, then that gunpowder just ignites on the target. Fun fact, an explosive bullet costs 29 copper to craft, but only sells for 8 copper. The endless musket pouch has a finite weight. The word hollow in Terraria does not come from the word hollow meaning empty inside, but for the word hollow meaning to make holy or sacred. Despite this, I'm pretty sure the unicorns are demonic. Despite hollowed armor being made of singular material, and requiring no paint to craft, it can be made into different colors depending on different parts of the armor. The Terror Blade's projectile, the Terror Beam, can travel 5,000 feet before disintegrating. It travels at the speed of 61 miles per hour, the same speed as a unicorn. Chippy Gaming, the largest Terraria YouTuber at the current moment, had precisely 549,200 subscribers on July 5th, 2019. The Angler and the Princess are children. This also makes them immortal. This is because children and pets are immortal. Conversely, this means the party girl is not a child. The average color of all the skin areas of the default Terraria character is this color, #DF835D. The Sawtooth Shark is a chainsaw that exists. Despite being a living creature, it can move its teeth like a chainsaw, emits motor sounds, and can breathe above water. All Terraria worlds are islands, as demonstrated by the ocean biome and the background. Wood is only sometimes flammable in Terraria. The formula for calculating the damage of the key brand is damage times 1 plus 5/3 times 1 minus the current HP over the max HP, unless the enemy has under 10% HP, in which it would be a straight 2.5x multiplier. Incidentally, the key brand cannot unlock any chests or locks. Platinum ore has a slight bluish tint compared to silver ore, which has a more neutral tint. This contrasts with real life, where silver is described as having a bluer tone. Encryption key for Terraria characters, this string of bits spells out, "Hey guys," in 16-bit encoding. Thank you, Red. Very cool. The Destroyer cannot destroy blocks, but it can destroy you. The Otherworldly seed literally tells you to get good. A large world is exactly 80,640,000 square feet, or 7,491,701.1456 square meters, including border space. This is 7.4917011456 square kilometers, or exactly 15.28918601114 times larger than the Vatican City. Note that since Terraria is 2D, this is from the side, not the air. Gemspark walls do not glow, even though they look like they do. Fallen stars glow yellow and have a distinctive star-like shape, yet all stars shown in space are shown as a point of white light in the sky. Also, an entire star falling from the sky doesn't damage the ground, but a small puny meteor does. The Moon Lord's core, assumed to be its heart, does not seem to be protected by its ribs. This seems to be a bad biological trait and oversight on the part of the Moon Lord. The Empress of Light is not smiling. The modifier that impacts their item's value the most is broken. Lazure is the oldest Terraria developer with their date of birth public on the wiki, being born on July 4th, 1981. The Paladin's shield has a 13.564 repeating percent chance to be dropped by Paladins in expert mode. The Paladin's hammer is not a hammer. It cannot hammer. It still gives the achievement though. Terraria's world is not two-dimensional because coins can spin. In Terraria, venom is dangerous, but only if it doesn't go down your throat for some reason. All town NPCs have 15 defense, even the cats and dogs. This makes them extremely easy to kill. The base tax rate in Terraria is 50 copper per hour, so 438,000 copper per year. That's 43 gold, 80 silver per year. Incidentally, this is also not an income-based tax system, but a flat tax. The Goblin and Mechanic have lines in the game referencing the relationship. This is despite the fact they are of different species. The Mechanic also presumably has vision impairment, just like the Goblin Tinkerer. The SHA-256 hash of the Terraria.exe file, the latest version as of released in making the video, is this, which I'm not going to read aloud. Magic Conch has a use time of 90, meaning it can be used every 1.5 seconds. The Crown of King Slime appears to have 3 rubies, 2 sapphires, and 2 emeralds on the sides facing us. Wraiths do not trigger pressure plates. The Wall of Flesh is canonically the core and the guardian of this world, existing to seal demons and ancient spirits away. This would make it good, so I don't know why we would kill it. Maybe it's just that ugly, which I mean, it pretty much is. When you sleep on a bed in Terraria, know that silk is made from spiders. Ale in Terraria is flammable. It's used to make the Molotov cocktail. This is despite ale's low alcohol content. Slime's gel is both adhesive and digestive/acidic. All keys in Terraria appear to be keys made for lever locks. They also appear to only have 2 or 3 pins, which seems terribly insecure. Only 22.3% of people who have played Terraria have decided to bow down to the angler. At the time of me writing this line into the script, as in not recording this, it has been 315,530,208 seconds since May 16th, 2011, the release day of Terraria. Adamantite, or Chalcum and Mithril, are based off the fictional metals adamantium/adamantine/adamant from Marvel and other sources, or Chalcum from ancient writings, and Mithril from J.R.R. Tolkien. Titanium and Cobalt are the 27th and 22nd elements in the periodic table, respectively. The structures of the Titanium and Adamantite forge are very slightly different. This is opposed to the Mithril and Orichalcum anvils, which are resprites of each other. Cobalt used to be jungle armor before 1.0.6. In Terraria 1.2.1, Platinum Armor got a female sprite. Specific, independent gender was added to Terraria in 1.0.6. Update 1.2.0.3.1 was released October 9th, 2013, the same day as Update 1.2.0.3. This is the longest update name of any Terraria version. It would be gone with the Halloween update on the 25th of the same month. The mechanic, as described by the official 8th anniversary lore, is a renowned genius who almost rebuilt Cthulhu and made the mechanical bosses. Man, the Goblin Tinkerer is lucky. Of the hard mode ore spheres, the Mithril and Orichalcum halberds are the only ones who share a name. Vetus Magnum presumably cannot auto-fire because it is a revolver, which is a non-automatic gun. Then again, the musket, which isn't even close to automatic, has auto-fire. The Terraria achievement Just Desserts appears to assert that Queen Slime is the sovereign of all jiggles, while the achievement Slippery Shinobi asserts that King Slime is the lord of all things slimy. This appears to create a Venn diagram like Frustration, where slimes are included, but some objects on the other end are not. As referenced previously, Slime's gel is acidic or digestive, but the Ninja and King Slime looks very undigested and preserved. Oceans in Terraria are generally shallow, being a few hundred feet deep. This is compared to most ocean in the world, which can be up to several kilometers deep. Terraria made the decision to use the Imperial system for their measurements, using miles per hour and feet. This is compared to Minecraft, which chose to use the metric system. Terraria does not take place on Earth. The gravity and terminal velocity are dissimilar. However, the weather on both planets is similar. The wall of flesh possesses a snake-like tongue that can pull players through blocks. Interestingly, he does not produce visible saliva for this tongue. The Horrified debuff is inflicted on the player. This tooltip implies that you have saw something so bad that you can't run away because it is so bad. This must be a temporary spell more than any type of internal feeling, as the player does not appear to have PTSD or any form of shock after defeating or seeing the Wall of Flesh. The Breaker Blade is the largest sword in the game. It once again shows that the center of mass is not a concept in Terraria. The player is unable to breathe water, but can breathe literally nothing. A player can theoretically jump several thousand blocks without wings, with maximum feather fall and jump equipment. The music box says it has a chance to record songs, but it has a guaranteed chance to record the song after a given delay. Terraria item number 324 is the item Illegal Gun Parts. Conversely, Terraria tile number 324 is the block Seashell, and its derivatives Starfish, Lightning Whelk Shell, Tulip Shell, and Hunonia Shell. The Fireworks box will never run out of fireworks. The unicorn on a stick is dropped rarely by the unicorn. The item is a type of hobby horse, toy horse. The first line of the first image on the Wikipedia page of the hobby horse reads, "Ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross." The water gun has a longer range than the slime gun, though both are extremely similar. The Witch Doctor is of a lizard species. He is the first lizard you will encounter until Golem. Golem seems to be a sun idol, despite the fact that lizards live underground in a temple with no sunlight. He's also allegedly powered on sunlight for some reason. Hellstone is canonically the hottest metal in Terraria, followed by Meteorite. Counting the creepers, the Brain of Cthulhu has 20 eyes in its first phase, and only 1 in its second phase. Despite being called the Eater of Worlds cannot destroy blocks, or even items. The sniper rifle and the rifle skeleton snipers use, who drop the sniper rifle, look different. The sniper rifle has a more modern look, with steel casing and green finish, while the sniper rifle that the skeleton snipers use looks much older with a wooden stock and dirty looking black steel parts. The sprites of all the treasure bags indicates that they are tied with 2 loops around the top, with 1 cord dangling to the right. The beetle, as seen in different levels of beetle endurance and might, gains arms as the buff becomes more powerful. Bunny Stew gives the well-fed buff for 10 minutes. A bottle of unprocessed grape juice gives the exquisitely stuffed buff for 16 minutes. This implies that 2 grapes are several times as filling as a whole bunny stew. Gold is nutritious in Terraria, just like in Minecraft. There are 2 platinum crown types, the Royal Tiara and the Platinum Crown in Terraria, and 2 golden crown types, the Star Princess Crown and the Golden Crown. In an old video, I calculated that a single platinum coin was worth about $22.5 million at the time. An agile coin gun has a use time of 7, meaning that I shoot 60 over 7, or roughly 8.57 coins per second. This means I can waste about $192.8 million per second. That means it will only take me about 20 minutes to delete Jeff Bezos' net worth. The tax collector is a reference to Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol, which is why he hates Santa. Well, Santa also just hates him right back. A bit un-Christmassy if you ask me. And again, it's basically June right now. Vile powder or vicious powder is not only corrupt or evil, but also poisonous. Make sure you're wearing the appropriate particulate respirator when splashing this. The companion cube depreciates the most in all of Terraria. It loses 4 platinum of value upon leaving the NPC buy menu, or 80% of its value. The treasure bag of the Brain of Cthulhu contains a heart, even though it's the Brain of Cthulhu. Mithril as a name is altered from the standard name for the fictional metal, Mithril. This is unlike the other fictional metals, or Calcum and Adamantite, which are unchanged. As far as I know, the fastest a Terraria YouTuber has ever grown in 1 month is Chippy Gaming in May 2020, gaining a record 87,000 subs in 1 month. The second fastest month was likely by Crabbar, gaining 66,000 subs after his Terra Calum series blew up. Barbecue ribs dropped from skeletons in the hard mode dungeon. This was likely added due to skeletons having exposed ribs, but then you realize that barbecue ribs have meat on them. Oh, and also, 2 glasses of grape juice are better than a full rack of ribs. Thanks, Terraria. If you shake a forest tree, it has a 0.3333% chance to drop a living wood wand, but only a 0.3322% chance to drop its counterpart, the leaf wand. This 0.0011 discrepancy is a blemish upon humanity. Last video I mentioned that the flask of venom is literally drinking venom. A few people pointed out that venom doesn't need to be strictly poisonous when ingested, which is true, it is an important distinction. Well, here's the flask of poison, which is literally poison. And we're not even mentioning the flask of fire, cursed flames, and the flask of party. Not the flask of gold though, don't worry, gold is not only edible but nutritious. Air resistance doesn't exist in Terraria. If you construct a walled tunnel, fill it with water, and then remove the water with a sponge, you fall with the same velocity, since the tunnel would have to be devoid of air. The target dummy makes a zombie death sound upon death. Unfortunately, this sack of dead wheat can't die, until you mine it at least. The third character of the second paragraph of the official 8th anniversary Terraria lore is E. The third word to the same paragraph is. I ran a random number generator of the Terraria item IDs and got hash 1146, which corresponds to the item's super dart trap. Related fact, the darts from the dart trap travel at 90 feet per second, or 98.75 kilometers per hour. The Legacy Console achievement Corruptible is awarded when you have a world that has half to corrupt. A similar achievement, Hallowed Be Thy Name, is awarded when you have half your world hallowed. The descriptions of these names have different punctuation and capitalization formats. The Vortex Pillar is the only pillar moon to have a ring. The achievement Star Destroyer describes destroying the pillars which are based on the moon. The moon is not a star. Corrupt and Crimson Grass is harder to cut than Hollowed or Pure Grass, since the lawnmower cannot mow them. King Slime and Queen Slime both have children. Assuming they have both never met, that would make them biologically asexual. The Hermes boots aren't based on Hermes' sandals, the Terraria. Unlike the Terraria, they cannot make you fly and are boots, not sandals. Following the chance to consume formula, if truffle worms worked as regular bait, they would have a 1 over 113 or 0.884% chance to be consumed as bait when using a tackle box or similar accessory. That would be over 10 times less chance to be consumed compared to the best bait, the master bait. The meteor shower increases fallen star chances. Maybe those meteors aren't really meteors. Coffee drops from angry trappers, man-eaters, and snatchers, but also the Bone Lee. The Orange Zappinator and Legacy Zappinator have ever so slightly different shades of orange. The Goblin Tinkerer is bald, and that's probably why he hates the stylist. At first, the princess seems like a random deposed princess wanderer, but the ending sentence of her bestiary line reads, "She appreciates all of her subjects from all walks of life." This could mean that you are her subjects, as she lives in the town. What's even weirder is that the princess is a child. The Wisp in a Bottle is a flaming skull based on the Will of the Wisp, a mythical ghost-like that kills travelers in swamps. It is also what the Terrasteel Wisp is based on. The ratio between the defense of the Dread Nautilus and the percent chance to get copper coins from the lucky coin squared times x minus the base health of a green slime in Master Mode cubed times x plus the drop chance of the slime staff from said slime times the king slime's health in Master Mode is this graph. I did just choose those values at random from the wiki. The titanium shards from the titanium barrier buff seem to oscillate between blue and red or pink colors. The buff icons for well-fed, plenty satisfied, and exquisitely stuffed shows a chicken leg, then a crab, then a full chicken or turkey. Ichor is the blood of the gods, yet the Terrarian drinks it at his leisure and sprays it on metal worms indiscriminately. The Red Rider is an air rifle, and the only one in the game. The Skeleton Sniper is probably a dead German soldier from World War II, as its gun resembles a FG-42 sniper rifle, a World War II era rifle, and it wears a Stahlhelm, a German helmet worn in the World Wars. Their bestiary entry supports this, saying they're a part of an elite military unit. However, the Rusted Company Standard and Ragged Brotherhood sigils these snipers spawn next to depict a sword and a weird cross thing, which do not resemble any World War II era insignia or even a gun. The confetti gun was the 1000th item added to the game, and it has the item ID 1000. This is when I would choose a tile ID to compare it to, but there are only 623 tile IDs. Item IDs start from the item ID 1, the iron pickaxe, but the tile IDs start from 0, the dirt block. The dirt block is also item ID 2 because the iron pickaxe came first. The princess, despite being a monarch, still pays taxes. Everyone the tax collector likes hates him, no one likes him. Thus is the eternal pain of being a taxman. In your Terraria directory, you can find changelog.txt, which is every single changelog of every Terraria update back to version 1.0, 10 years ago. As of the update 1.2.4.3, this file is 394,908 bytes, and would take 5 hours and 51 minutes to read out loud, according to wordcounter.net. The most common word is fixed, which makes sense, followed by now and issue. The mechanic sells all but one of the accessories used to craft a grand design, with the ruler being sold by the Goblin Tinkerer. This is despite the fact that the mechanic sells a type of ruler, the mechanical ruler. The frozen turtle shell claims to put a shell around the player when below 50% life, but instead opts for this lumpy figure-8 blue orb instead. The discount card is possibly one of the greatest monetary-based items in all of Terraria, yet it has a sell value of 1 gold. The discount card does not affect the price of healing at the nurse. This is contrary to the fact that the achievement for spending money at her is the frequent flyer, which references discount programs on airlines. The Selenian enemy's name means related to the moon, and it was born forth from Selene, the goddess of the moon in Greek mythology. According to Terraria, the Jungle Rose is prettier than the extremely similar Nature's Gift item, despite them having nearly no differences other than color. Celestial cuffs aren't even closed at the end of the shackle. That makes them rather useless to me as handcuffs. The Dryad is over 500 years old. Since the lore states that the Dryads were the ones who conquered Cthulhu, this means the modern state of the Terraria world is actually rather young. To get the Resonance Scepter, you must murder 8 children on average. The Moon Mask's curves seem to be impossible considering the shape of the player's face and the hardness of the player's skull. Jin's Curse is a leggings armor piece that grants Featherfall. It says it grants you slow fall at the cost of your feet, but it scams you. It also takes your legs and your knees. The fried egg drops from spiders and scorpions. What kind of egg is that, anyway? The Dye Trader is Middle Eastern in origin, as the scimitar she drops is a curved sword of Middle Eastern origin. The painting, The Truth is Up There, includes a bunny as the organism lifted by the UFO's beam. The regular robe, ruby robe, sapphire robe, amethyst robe, and amber robes have the same style with parallel sleeves, while the topaz, diamond, and emerald robes have outstretched sleeves. You will notice that each robe has different features in the sparkle around the collar, front, and sleeves, however. The Orchakam headgear has horns reminiscent of a samurai's helmet. A sextant can still be used underground in Terraria, despite them not being able to use that way in real life. Then again, a real sextant is used to read your location, not display the phase of the moon. Gem squirrels' tails are sharper than regular squirrels' tails. Dripping lava emits light, but cannot damage players. Some sinks in Terraria come with storage underneath, while some do not. Unlike most dragons, Betsy only has 4 limbs instead of 6. This, as explained in a video by Minute Earth, is more evolutionarily sound. The Betsy's Wrath flame projectiles are not plasma, but gaseous, as the weapon's tooltip calls the fireballs defense-reducing miasma. The mechanical worm's sprite does not actually show a worm, but only the head segment of the destroyer. The plasma lamp appears to be an in-game variant of the plasma globe toy from real life. Despite weapon imbues clearly being intended to be poured upon the sword, hence why it persists after death, the animation clearly shows the player drinking the imbue. The glass and golden chandelier appear to be resprites of each other. Hailstone is used in obsidian furniture items along with obsidian. Since metal detectors can detect pots, strange plant, life fruit, and fossils, the contents of these must be magnetic. Due to this, we can also say that Hailstone is not metallic, as it is not picked up by the detector in any form. Unlike in Terraria, real-life palladium remains a white color at room temperature. Likewise, cobalt is not generally blue, but is frequently depicted as blue due to the vibrant cobalt blue pigment it produces. Beezers are literally masses of undigested food found in digestive systems. For some reason, it gives poison resistance in this game. Goblins seem to have a skin tone that ranges from green to blue depending on their type. Goblin thieves have a bandana over their eyes that is often associated with thieves to conceal their identity, even though this would be redundant as they are part of a very conspicuous army. Though the radar item detects nearby enemies, radar is typically used in large installations to detect objects kilometers away, and is not used in a pocket scenario. The Queen Slime's crown is less valuable than the King Slime's. King Slime's crown is made of gold and has 4 large rubies, 4 emeralds, and 4 sapphires. Queen Slime's crown is made of platinum or silver, and has 4 large amethysts, 4 small amethysts, and what looks like 4 smaller sapphires. Gem prices are hard to factor in, but it is true that pure gold is more valuable in the market than platinum, and significantly more than silver. Most hook sprites in this game follow this curved shape, with the squirrel hook, web slinger, candy cane hook, dual hook, and lunar hook being the exceptions. Bombfish pulsate after being thrown. Despite frost daggerfish being made of ice, a material much weaker than steel, they do more damage in both throwing knives and shurikens. The breaker blade is serrated, even though you never use it to saw anything and it would be hugely impractical to saw with. Eater of souls drop burgers. Everything in this game that inflicts venom remains true to the definition. Venom is injected toxin versus poison, which is not. All venom-inflicting weapons and enemies seem to do this injection. And finally, the Moonlord has fingernails. The angler defends himself with frost daggerfish, despite being from the tropical ocean. The bottomless lava bucket has a red line going across its sprite. The bottomless water bucket does not have a blue line going across its sprite, but a purple one. All of the present furniture sprites have a cross style. When this sprite is placed down, it has a strong resemblance to the Danish flag. No other present resembles any Nordic flag, except this one that almost passes for Sweden. The difference between the 1.3 and the 1.2 sprites of the Abomination is 2 more arms, a missing pustule thing, and a second wing above the eye. Of course, the sprite itself is also more polished. Obsidian is given a strong purple tinge in both Minecraft and Terraria, yet real obsidian is black in color. A Terrarian solar eclipse is not total, as there remains a ring around the sun from the moon. This is an annular eclipse. This could mean that the Terrarian moon is too far from Earth to fully block out the sun, something that will also happen to our Earth as the moon is slowly moving away from us. Following the last fact, a Terrarian solar eclipse and blood moon may occur back to back. This is impossible in real life, as a solar eclipse may only occur in a new moon, and a total lunar eclipse, or blood moon, can only occur in a full moon. Then again, the whole moon phase thing in Terraria is completely uncoupled from real life, so I'll stop bashing Terraria weather events now. In Terraria 1.2, iron hammers had their breaking power nerfed from 45% to 40%. This was when the lead hammer was introduced, at 43% breaking power. This is also the same update when the pearlwood hammer was introduced, at 45% breaking power. The Empress of Light's tentacles in Phase 2 flex in a repeating pattern, 1 long squirmed in 2 short bursts before resetting. The Rainbow Cursor sprite item contains every color on the rainbow except red. Luminite's tooltip is a pebble from the heavens. Assuming that this means that the heavens is where the Moonlord lives, this could mean that the moon is partially made of luminite. The Cobalt, Mithril, and Adamantite chainsaws share the same skinny, dark-colored chain shape. The Palladium, Orichalcum, and Titanium chainsaws have a much wider chain with more spaced-out teeth. This is not seen on the hard mode or drills. Of the unobtainable Luminite chainsaws, all of them share the same blade-type shape, except for the Solar Flare chainsaw. In 1.2, the Goblin Tinker's reforging costs are reduced by 90%. The little shields to select PvP teams have little patterns on them. As far as I can tell, these have no correlation with anything. Skeleton is translated as this, or Skeleton King in Chinese. Duke Fishron is also rather interestingly translated as Pig Dragon Fish Duke, which is what he is after all. Google Translate also directly translates this sequence as Duke Fishron. The meat of a Duke Fishron is referred to as pork. The Sharkron are Duke Fishron's children, and he uses them as kamikaze missiles that instantly explode on a pile of gore upon death. What a father. The Spectral Subliger is the only piece of, now removed, armor that increased your mana by a non-multiple of 20. As expected, golden life fruit hearts are shinier than the regular blood counterparts. Terraria's Daybreak has a tooltip, rend your foes asunder with a Spear of Light, which is a rather seldom used term nowadays, which means to tear apart violently. The angle of the Chlorophyte pickaxe is significantly curvier than every other pickaxe in the game, which I imagine makes it quite a pain to use. Of all the axes described as war axes by the game, only the Adamantite, Titanium, and Demonite war axes actually have a double-edged blade. One can only imagine how easy the Cosmic Car Key would be to pick. The Shrimpy Truffle and Scaly Truffle are lopsided in different directions. Chicken Nuggets also have the tooltip, Caution, may contain Harpy. This is rightfully so, since even if Harpies are part bird, they are also part human. The Cobalt Shield once did not bear the cross, instead bearing a keyhole or something. All normal paint buckets have the same base printing on the front of the bucket, with their deep variations having a striped band that appears lower. The only difference is shadow paint, possibly because it might be taking the place of deep black paint. The Hollowed Crate is the pre-hard mode variant of the crate fished in the Hollow, a hard mode exclusive item. It cannot be caught normally without introducing Hollow into a pre-hard mode world. The Dart Rifle used to look much sadder than the tactical looking corruption themed rifle we have today. The Dart Pistol also had its sprite updated at the same time, but it looked way less sad before than the Dart Rifle did. Seeds have a lumpy sprite in the inventory, but are perfectly spherical when fired. All slime banners share the same shape except for the Umbrella Slime banner, Toxic Sludge banner, Gastropod banner, and the Hoppin' Jack banner. And finally, the Witch's Broom drops from a boss that physically cannot fly. The Tungsten Pickaxe has this blue marker on it, counter to the other pickaxes which lean more into a red or yellow tone. The new official Terraria wiki, hosted at wiki.gg, uses images stored in the WebP format, not .png. This means I can't upscale them in Paint. Gotta make my life hard. The Iron Pickaxe is once much darker than it is currently. When Plantera opens her mouth, you may notice that you can see her flower reproductive organs. Clearly, she has been successful, with her bulbs all over the jungle and enough seeds to be ready to fire at you like a machine gun. Of course, like with many Terraria bosses, you can still abduct her child. In Journey mode, mana is not actually unlimited, instead regenerating extremely quickly. In Master mode, the Ancient Doom gets a slight increase in damage, completely in line with most other enemies in the game. Terraria uses the British English spelling of Spectre, which is Spectre. This word means a type of ghostly apparition, which sounds about right. Despite this, the word scepter, as in wand, is in American English. All wall blocks in Terraria require 400 copies to complete research in Terraria Journey mode. In 1.4, the temple key became noticeably shinier. The multicolor wrench can place all types of wire but does not include yellow on its sprite. The fart sound made by the whoopee cushion is a short, a longer apparent fart sound to be heard when Queen Slime dies. Most Master Mode exclusive pets are small versions of the larger boss. The three exceptions are the Martian Saucer, Lunatic Cultist, and Wall of Flesh, possibly because it'd be really weird to make cute small versions of them. Unlike Duke Fishron, the little Fishron doesn't have an anal fin. The Goat Mountain Terraria has 1 or 2 horns depending on its sprite, which both visibly curve backwards at a very significant angle. The Muramasa broadsword is named after a famous Japanese swordsmith also called Muramasa. Obviously the blade isn't curved like a real katana, but that is besides the point. Meanwhile, the sword from Calamity mod, called Mirasama, has nothing to do with Muramasa name-wise or function-wise at this point, as it is just a syllable swap. It is in fact superior because it is curved though. The Flesh Grinder and Meat Grinder used to share the same name, but this was changed due to confusion. The sound when killing and summoning the Empress of Light are slightly different, as it does not include a laugh. Spectre Wings used to be called Ghost Wings, with the only change being this recipe and name. Eurazer's goggles are internally referred to as Testikun, as is the rest of his armor with their weird names. The Nazar used to look like this. The mechanical cart accelerates at 22.5 tiles per second squared, or 55 feet per second squared. That's 16.76 meters per second squared, or roughly 1.7 Gs of acceleration. The Razorblade Typhoon only shoots 1 projectile in 1.4 versus 2 in 1.3, though they did buff its damage by 50%. This reverses the change which gave it 2 projectiles, which was added in 1.3, though the previous versions did not have the damage buff. The Phantom Wires spawned when using the Grand Design are called Wire Kites. Another fun fact about the Grand Design is that its sound effect is identical to the one used by the blowgun. All souls are made of 2 parts rotating, with the leading bulb being the brightest. The Soul of Fright also has these 2 parts, but looks more disconnected, showing what looks like 4 parts. The plate on which Turkur the Ungrateful's body sits on is decorated with lettuce, apples, grapes, and stuffing. The Staff of Earth's damage varies based on the velocity of their weapon, with it being calculated differently in 1.3 and 1.4. It received a sizable buff in 1.4 since it clearly wasn't the best weapon in 1.3. The Truffleworm sprite seems to be upside down with its eyes at the bottom of the sprite. This is despite the fact it burrows downward with the blue tail going down, or maybe it's not. Since the sea turtle's bestiary entry says it prefers salt water and it spawns in the ocean in Terraria is in fact made of salt water. The blade staff is internally called Smallster. The digging well cart is the slowest minecart in the game. All seeds in the game are uniform in base sprite, aside from the pumpkin seeds and of course acorns. In Terraria, we have the white pearl, black pearl, and pink pearl, organized in ascending rarity. This roughly mimics real life, where white pearls are the most common, with black pearls being rarer, though still popular. Pink pearls do occur naturally, but are rather rare. Jin's Curse and Featherfall both reduce gravity by the same amount, -66% or -90%, depending on whether the up key is held. The Slayer of Worlds achievement shows a player in Red's armor triumphing over the Eye of Cthulhu, the Eater of Worlds, and Skeletron, the original trio of bosses introduced in Terraria. The Slime Mount has the buff tooltip Boing, while the upgraded Gelatinous Pillion has the buff tooltip Boing Flak Boing, indicating its upgraded ability to fly. The King Slime Mask does not wear a crown, unlike the Queen Slime Mask. Terraria servers are limited to 255 players. In practice, this limit is almost never reached since Terraria doesn't have a large public server audience. For entity with no mouth, the Empress of Light does a lot of screaming. And finally, the Ugly Sweater has a 1.001% or 1 out of 99.9 chance of being obtained from a present in hard mode. The bestiary entry for the Creeper is, manipulated through the hive mind of the Crimson, Creeper serves the brain's eyes and orbit around it for defense in numbers. This means that the brain would be blind without its creepers, and I guess that's why it has a eye on its heart in the second phase. The console-exclusive Tonbogiri inflicts poison despite being coated in venom. If you are aware, there's a distinction between the two both in-game and in real life. Most rainbow weapons in the game change colors based on secret beta tester names, such as the Last Prism and the Night Glow. An exception is the Kaleidoscope, which doesn't actually change. Coins ascend in size when they're dropped on the ground, but they don't change when they're fired out of a coin gun. The Pig Granada's tooltip is beat the shindig out of it. Apparently, a shindig is a social gathering with dancing, according to Merriam-Webster. There are 3 guitars in Terraria, the Rain Song, Ivy, and Stellar Tune. Only one of them does damage. The Cobalt armor is a feudal Japanese theme, showing most of the hat, naginata spear, and sword based heavily on the katana. Meanwhile, Palladium is a feudal European theme shown in the spear and headdress. The contents of a geode can be worth up to 12 gold with perfect RNG, which is 240 times the standard sell price of just 5 silver. Intriguingly, the Mace Hell Armored Bones has more defense than the Spike Shield Held Armored Bones, despite the shield one having, you know, a shield. All drills have no knockback, except the Chlorophyte Drill, Drax, and Laser Drill, so if you were crazy, Drax could actually be used as a weapon. The Crystal Assassin hood shares the Kabuto seen on the Orichalcum headgear. The Mysterious Tablet has 400 HP and uses the same AI as the Lunatic Devotee, which is basically no AI. In 1.3, Santa got a bag to carry his presents. White thread replaces green thread in the Japanese release of Terraria, creating an interesting conundrum when green stucco is crafted with white thread. White thread itself is also crafted the same as purple thread, not green thread. There are 2 princess sets in the game, with one coming from the clothier and one from goodie bags. They look completely different, with one being based on Zelda, one based on nothing, and both having no similarities to the princess NPC. To make it more confusing, the chest pieces are both also referred to as princess dress. The Dry Disc painting is a parody of Grande Odalisque, an 1814 painting. At least the pixelated version is more PG. Despite being an obvious reference to Bruce Lee, the Bone Lee bestiary entry has nothing to say about Bruce Lee. Of course, this is staying in universe. Iker is pronounced Icor, but it is also incorrectly pronounced Iker by many, including me when I first played the game. The game knows this, and the Iker Sticker mob has this erroneous but understandable rhyme in its name. There are 3 pets in the game which are saplings: the Pet Sapling, the Cursed Sapling, and the Everstream Sapling. Who knew there were that many deadly trees in this game? King Slime summoned, the Slime Crown was given a lot more contrast in 1.3.1. There are 6 different sprites used by the Bloodthorn weapon, which can range from a single spike to this bolt thing. Talk about ouch. The Goblin Peon's ear got less curvy in 1.4, and its shirt became more tattered. I guess that's what happens when the game describes you as little more than cannon fodder, and I guess that's what a peon is after all. The revolver's gun handle is white, which means it could be a grip made of ivory, given that most revolvers are quite old. Despite the chain gun being a famously inaccurate gun, it doesn't say it's inaccurate, unlike the Gatligator. Shroomite helmets resemble various gear. The helmet resembles a gas mask, the headgear seems like a helmet with a radio earpiece, and the mask resembles a visor or mask with night vision goggles. Wisp Die has 2 other variants, the Infernal Wisp and Unicorn Wisp dies. 2 of the blue armored bones variants are actually unarmed, while the other variants all have weapons of some kind. The turtle scale mail shows a distinct shell on its back end, while the beetle scale mail loses the shell to differentiate it from the beetle shell. Sakura trees, despite being cherry blossoms, don't drop cherries. The Morningstar whip can drop from all types of armored bones, but only one variant of rusty armored bones actually carries a whip or mace-like object. The granite golem is internally referred to with the portmanteau grolem, as well as grelemental for granite elemental. Water gets darker as you go deeper into the earth, going from pure blue to this purple color. Before 1.3.1, the kimono leg sprite used to be swapped between male and female. The jellyfish diving gear and its upgrade, the Arctic diving gear, have their snorkels on the opposing side of each other. You may notice that only some sinks come with plumbing outside of the main stock, while most keep it nice and clean. Sometimes, though, they do seem to cover up with a square cupboard. The Vortex Speeder plays the shot sound twice whenever it shoots, and combined with the fact that its shot sound is obnoxiously loud, makes it one of the most annoying weapons in the game. Maybe it's up there with the Stellar Tune. The Heart Lantern is the only lantern in the game not to contain any source of light. After all, torches, fallen stars, and souls are all capable of lighting themselves. The Life Crystal can't. Not one toilet in Terraria is made of a block that is pleasant to sit on. I imagine sitting on rock, metal, slime, ice, flesh, obsidian, brick, cactus, or honey isn't too pleasant. I can't imagine the sensation of sitting on a slab of honey, slime, or rotting flesh when I'm just trying to relieve my diarrhea. If I had to, the glass toilet, the Terra toilet, or the Martian toilet would be most comfortable in my opinion. As mentioned in a previous video, the Soul of Fright is unique in having 4 parts instead of 2. This is shown in the Soul of Fright in a Bottle sprite, with these little pixels. The Charged Blaster Cannon possibly has the smallest sprite of any Terraria weapon, with the sprite just being 9x7 pixels across. A bitmap 9x7 color 24-bit image is only 189 bytes in size. All potions in Terraria now feature a distinctive silver cap on the tops of their sprites. This was introduced in 1.3, and all potions before this were typically uncapped in a shaped flask. They were also not filled to the brim with liquid, unlike the potions of today. Grandfather clocks always read either 9 o'clock or 3 o'clock depending on the clock, and these never change when placed. The exceptions are the pillar clocks, which don't have a face on them at all. Another interesting fact about watches is that every one of them shows 9 o'clock, except the copper and tin watches. They are unique because they only have one hand and are pointed toward 10 o'clock. This could be to show their inferior accuracy only to the hour, but the pre-1.3.1 sprites actually have 2 hands, which are pointing toward 9:10 or 2:45. Only the Cobalt and Mithril drill show 2 lights on the side of the drill. All other drills have a single unit body with no lights. Apparently, the Crystal Shard used to look like this. Ancient Hollowed Armor sprite appears to only cover the breasts on the female version. If you look really closely, the moon is tilted to when it rises and sets. The wolf sprite from 1.3 seems to have blood around its mouth, which was removed in 1.4. The bestiary entry for fairies refers to them as humanoid. Yeah, no. In your Terraria directory within Steam apps, you can find the Terraria changelog text file. Last time I took a look at this last June, it was 1.4.2.3. It had a size of 394,908 bytes, and would take 5 hours and 51 minutes to read out loud, according to wordcounter.net. Now in 1.4.3.6, it has a size of 410,233 bytes and a read time of 6 hours and 5 minutes. Terraria's assets are stored in XMB files like this, and there are a lot of them. Terraria's player files are encrypted with a key, which is "Hey guys," spelled like this. This serves no purpose at all, since it's not like Terraria is trying to DRM their player files. It's not a competitive game after all. Rita is just having some fun. Dryad's Blessing summons 2 leaf barriers of 10 leaves each, spaced equidistantly. In the Prismatic Bolts 2 sound effect for the Empress of Light, you can hear the sound wash over you from left to right. In the Google Trends graph for Terraria, you can clearly see when each update came out. There are smaller upticks, of course, and right now we seem to be on the one due to the seemingly imminent release of 1.4.4. Critical hits and damage weren't added until 1.0.6. And finally, this. I don't know if it'll be fixed, but that's the kimono on a chair for you. The highest amount of concurrent players ever playing Terraria was 489,886 during the peak of the 1.4 update. Today, around 28,000 to 40,000 players play Terraria depending on the time of the day. At the time I am writing the script, its 24-hour peak of 40,527 put it 31st on the leaderboard. Then you realize another 33,000 people are also playing Team Mod Loader, so add that up. This website also shows price data, and it's interesting how cheap Terraria sometimes can get. Nowadays, the sales are almost around 50%. Apparently, the cheapest copy of Terraria is in Argentina at 130 Argentine pesos, or around $1 US. This is almost certainly due to some kind of hyperinflation. Pink gel is uniquely non-flammable, until it isn't. You cannot use pink gel as ammunition for your flamethrower or elf melter, but it's perfectly a-okay to use in a Molotov cocktail. Considering dynamite and the bomb's cost and radius, the dynamite destroys around 7.5 tiles per silver spent, while the bombs destroy around 26 tiles per silver spent. Efficient. Vampire miners from old-gen console don't wear a mining helmet, but they can still go off light. The Drax used to be findable in shadow chests in the mobile version, even in pre-hard mode, which is completely broken. Aside from pink gel, gel always shows the color of the first slime killed to enter its stack. This would make our gel show a variety of colors, but it always resets to blue upon world reload, hence why it's basically only shown in the blue color. Every unlaunched flail in Terraria has 8 or technically 9 spikes poking out of its sprite. The only exception, of course, is the flower Pow. The Tao of Pow rhymes in English, but it doesn't when it's pronounced natively as Dou, at least in Mandarin. Interestingly, in the Chinese version of Terraria, the name is Taiji Lianjia, or Tai Chi Flail. Gel is only shown on the bottom side of a sticky dirt bomb, but all of it can stick. Storm Divers are internally called Vortex Riflemen, and their banner was actually originally called this. This is also true for Brain Sucklers and Vortexians. Hollowed Armor is the only vanilla set to have a head variation for Summoner. This is common in mods like Calamity, but was added to Hollowed Armor 1.4. I guess it makes sense since the Hollowed and Hard Mode Ore armors are the only true all-class armors in Terraria. The console-exclusive Titan, Dragon, and Spectral armors used to be resprites of Gold, Jungle, and Mithril Hood and Robe. It's pretty obvious, but this was rectified when 1.2 was brought to console. Skeletron's teeth have a gap, but his prime sibling doesn't. Both the Creeper and the True Eye of Cthulhu's have a glint in the top left corner of their eyes. All the wood armors have texture in their helmets, but the palm wood helmet seems to be unusually smooth, kinda like a coconut. Different trees have different chances for shaking. For example, a 2.4302 chance for a rotten egg in a forest tree, but 2.8543 in a corrupt or crimson tree. Why these extremely precise numbers? I have no clue. Only 400 dropped item entities can be present in the world at a time. Any dropped items over this number won't spawn and will get deleted. Despite being obtained pretty easily in hard mode, the Holy Hand Grenade has a rarity of Lime, a rarity reserved for around the Plantera stage. Of course, it's not the only weird thing about the Holy Hand Grenade. The large gems generally look extremely similar to their smaller counterparts, down to the cuts in the gems, aside from the grand orb of Amber. In the last video, a lot of people mentioned that I missed the axe, the guitar, and Terraria. I thought I couldn't play notes, but it's actually pretty interesting that they added the ability for it to do so in 1.4. Before 1.4, it was completely random what note it played. Neat, huh? The harp can only be played in whole tones, so it cannot play F, which is a semitone from E. The Phase Blade and Phase Saber used to have the same sprite, but this was rectified in 1.3.2 to include a little light on the bottom. The Pearl Sandstone block has a weirdly long triple-barreled name, as it just applies a standard prefix. Vicious Powder used to actually have 2 knots on it versus 1 on the others. This was rectified in 1.3.1. Badger's hat drops from the Wall of Flesh, but only if you kill it on the same day as the Eye of Cthulhu, so within 24 minutes. Lesser healing potions can appear in placed form, but you yourself can't place them down. Every bookshelf has its unique taste, but the Dynasty one's gotta be the most jarring. You can't even see any books in that. The little 1-block holes into sword shrines seems to implicate that the enchanted swords fell out of the sky into the ground or something. Mana crystals used to cost 10 fallen stars in 1.1, then 5 in 1.2, then 3 in 1.3, but got re-nerfed to 5 in 1.4. Ebon, or Ebon, as a prefix means black, so Ebonstone literally means black stone. It's where ebony gets its name, a name for a dark wood. In fact, that's how it's translated in Terraria. The Kraken has the largest projectile size of any yo-yo at 19 pixels across. That's 18% larger than the smallest at 16 pixels. The Hot Reels achievement has a hook attached to string submerged in lava. This is despite all hooks being attached to some kind of bobber in Terraria. Most treasure bags drop some amount of money, like 15 gold for Plantera, but the Duke Fishron bag only drops 20 silver. The text on the Chinese lantern reads Kai or open. That's a pretty weird thing to put on a lantern, but I guess they tried to put a word on it given how many pixels they had to work with. All the in-a-bottle lanterns cannot be toggled off with wire, as their sources light are not within your control. The spider brain only has 4 legs, even though arachnids have 8 legs. Still looks creepy though. In update 1.2.3, the Dungeon Guardian gained 999 defense from 9000 to 9999. This was the same update that fixed the turtle armor exploit. The lunatic cultist appears to be wearing a mantle, cloak, and hood over its entire body. Since the Dungeon Guardian can only take 1 damage, with a base 4% critical chance, it takes 9,614 hits on average to defeat it. At 50%, this would take 6666 hits, and at the maximum of 100%, it would take just 5,000 hits to defeat the Dungeon Guardian. The obsidian swordfish's protrusion is serrated, unlike the smooth pike found on a regular swordfish. The palladium pike looks just like a halberd, a type of medieval European spear. Meanwhile, the orichalcum halberd looks just like a pike. Tim is one of the oldest added enemies in Terraria, with it being added all the way back in 1.0.3. According to the bestiary entry for the rainbow slime must maintain a constant fluid intake, for some reason. Crimson blocks like crimsand, crimsandstone, and crimstone all use the crim prefix, but shadewood doesn't. This is unlike the corruption, which does maintain perfect consistency. All toilets share the same basic construction except the living wood and bamboo ones, which look more like a latrine. Some bookcases have a sprite in them resembling the water bolt. Trees planted in the desert like palm trees, pearlwood, shadewood, and ebonwood all grow on this lump thing versus in dirt like a regular sapling. The demolitionist seems to carry a lantern around even though he already seems to have a mining helmet on. Turker the Ungrateful's boss icon is shown as this skull thing, as it is the Terraria 3DS boss icon, which is the only version still having Turker in it. Since the 3DS version may never be updated, that old version will probably serve forever as a relic of the past. And the last and technically bonus fact, Terraria ticks at 60 Hz or 60 times per second. This is the same as the core frame rate of the game, which is also 60 frames per second, and you can see the game slow down like this if you turn frame skip to off and cap the frame rate. This rate is 3 times faster than Minecraft's internal tick rate, which is capped at a maximum of 20 ticks per second. The Itsy Betsy pet is a riff on the common rhyme Itsy Bitsy Spider. If you're from an English-speaking country, you've probably heard of it. When Striking Moment was introduced in 1.3.4, it incorrectly said that it increases damage by 300%, when it actually does by 400% or 5 times. In 1.3.4.1, it was changed to say it increased 500% damage, which was still wrong. It took until 1.4.2.1 to actually fix it to say 400%, which is correct. The bell is a component that can play music, but unlike other musical components, its upgraded form cannot play music. The dragon egg and Betsy's egg seem to be resprites of each other, just with different colors. In 1.4.0.1, the pink thread sprite turned from this rather pastel color to a more saturated variety. It was on August 1st, 2022, when I learned that the maid set exists in Terraria. Following the item ID order of pylons, it goes from forest to jungle, then hollow, then cavern, then ocean, then desert, then snow, then mushroom, and finally universal. Skeletron is referred to as a demon in the old man's lore. Lantern nights occur after a boss or invasion has been defeated. This means someone or something is releasing lanterns and congratulate your victory, as referenced in the guide's quotes. I'd presume it's the NPCs. Skeletron is part of Cthulhu's skeleton in the lore, but he himself resembles a human skeleton versus the unholy, squid-faced abomination that you would expect. I guess that's what guarding a dungeon does to you. The guide Voodoo Doll's white in his eyes was reversed when the sprite was changed in 1.3.1. The unimplemented red envelopes from the Chinese New Year event would contain 50 to 500 copper coins within them. In real life, putting 50 to 500 pennies in a red envelope would be extremely tedious and rather weird due to the low value. But if they were Terraria copper coins, well then, congrats, you're a millionaire. Terraria seems to support the Japanese IME, but all kana and kanji don't seem to render properly in Terraria. It can't even render the kanji which are CGK unified with Chinese characters, which are supported. I don't blame them though, as Japanese isn't officially supported in Terraria. The Crystal Serpent has 2 different impact sounds that sound like this. They sound very similar to the crackle of real-life fireworks. Looking at the proportions of Retinazer, he must have his laser retracted into his body when he has his lens cover on. The purple color you see in chat when an invasion starts is AF4BFF, which is this color. 8 of the princesses' names are of definitive Japanese origin, with 3 from popular culture and 5 from the words ai, meaning love, ikari, meaning light, momo, meaning peach, hime, meaning princess, and yuki, meaning courage. The mechanical cart provides a small defense boost based on the speed you are currently riding at. Rainbow bricks had their rarity upgraded from white to blue in 1.4. Voodoo demons are said to be of higher rank, explaining why they are more powerful than regular demons. Senex is the only dev to have 2 different vanity sets, a battle set and a dress set. Both of these sets share the same tiara though. In version 1.4.3.3, pixie wings became 1 pixie dust cheaper to make it, so you only needed 1 stack, not 1 stack and 1. Previous to 1.4.1, the Dungeon Guardian could be dealt 5 damage a debuff tick from the Life Drains debuff. This was changed when they made the Dungeon Guardian immune to all debuffs. There are 2 vanity trees in Terraria, the pink sakura and yellow willow trees. You can see the latter in the thumbnail. Lane 4's wings are called prehensile. The word itself means to be able to grasp or hold, as in a prehensile tail. That makes sense because you can't expect a plain old cloak to be able to fly or move on its own. The bestiary entry for the Raven mob in Terraria is just Nevermore repeated 7 times. This is a reference to the Raven poem by Poe, as is the Nevermore painting. The quad-barreled shotgun is the slowest gun in the entire game, taking the Terrarian a whole 0.916 seconds for the Terrarian to reload. Hypixel Skyblock took its reforged system from Terraria, some name for name. Of course, the balancing is different on many. A surprisingly small amount of enemies are immune to Dryad's Bane, which are the Lunatic Cultist Decoys, Martian Officer Shields, the Dungeon Guardian, Dungeon Spirits, the Flying Dutchman, the Martian Saucer, the Mysterious Portal and Tablet, Phantasmal Dragon, Pirate's Cursed, Poltergeist, Destroyer Probe, Reaper, Solar Pillar, Destroyer itself, and the Wraith. The Tainted Ghoul seems to be dropping Ichor out of its mouth, with the Vile Ghoul dropping Cursed Flames appropriately. Don't know what the Dreamer Ghoul is dripping though. The Tragic Umbrella has a curve at the end of its shaft, unlike a normal umbrella. The achievement, Back for Second, from Old Gen console refers to the mechanical bosses as Prime Bosses. The Drax used to have a hammer ability and was called the Ham Drax, until hammers could hammer blocks. This conflicted with mining, so the ability was removed. Today, the only mining tool that can also hammer blocks is the Drill Containment Unit. The amount of damage inflicted by the Tiny Eaters from the Scourge of the Corruptor varies by version. It's 75% in 1.4, 70% in 1.3 in Old Gen console, and 55% on 3DS. The Lost Girl purposely has 250 health to look like an NPC in need of saving. This illusion breaks down on higher difficulties, but it shouldn't work on people who play in higher difficulties anyway. Strange plants are more valuable than chlorophyte ore to the metal detector. The Sharenga bow was the only way to inflict Cursed Inferno before hard mode, but has since been removed, sadly. Both the Princess and Angler use a ghastly death noise since as children they can't technically die. Broken Armor and Withered Armor are 2 different effects that do exactly the same thing. The SDMG got major buffs stat-wise as well as sprite-wise in 1.4. The Volatile Gelatins periodically is defined as exactly 0.833 seconds or 50 ticks in Terraria speak. The Aqua Scepter used to be much stubbier than it is now, missing the central crystal. Prior to 1.2.4, the Flasks of Gold would actually apply Ichor instead of Midas' Touch due to a mistake. Unlike a normal wrench, the Combat Wrench seems to not feature adjustability. I guess it's not supposed to be used as a wrench anyway. And finally, the Martian bed looks more like one of those reclining chairs at a dentist than a regular bed. Judging by thinness, even an airline seat would be more comfortable. Alright, so for the other 8 videos, a lot of those facts have been more trivia than useless. And of course, some of the facts have been actually partially useful. I've tried to make these facts as useless as possible while not trying to sound too boring. I'm sure some of you can still extract some use out of these, but that's inevitable. Anyway, let's go. Queen Slime's relic actually has its wings lopsided with the left wing shown above the right wing. The golden carp, flarefin koi, and ebon koi are the only carp fish caught in Terraria. The bat hook got nerfed in 1.4, making it no longer the fastest hook in the game. Gladiators are from Rome, being made to fight in its Colosseum, but they are dropped from the Hoplite mob. Hoplites are Greek. The Gladius is one of 2 short swords that has built-in inaccuracy, along with my favorite sword, the Starlight. Of course, at the ranges we are talking at, it's no biggie. The Solar Eruption, in total, sports 18 pairs of spikes when fully extended. The more you know. Despite being a spear in Terraria, real-life Naginata can be used to batter, stab, or hook an opponent, but they are often spun and slashed, not used as traditional spear. The little human in the debuffs such as On Fire and Frostburn is actually the old guide voodoo doll sprite from when his eyes were inverted from where they are now. The Obsidian Sink actually only required 2 Hellstone to craft before 1.4, but now it requires Obsidian, of course. The Oil debuff, which makes fires more effective, works differently in 1.3 and 1.4. In 1.3, it makes On Fire deal 14 damage per second instead of 4, 18 instead of 6 for Curse Inferno, 22 instead of 8 for Frostburn, and 31 instead of 15 for Shadow Flame. In 1.4, it just adds 25 DPS when entities under the influence of fire. Much simpler. The Arcalis had a rarity of purple, the highest rarity in 1.3, is the only base purple rarity item, as all other ones are just items reforged up from Cyan and Red. The Arcalis, like all other dev items, is now Cyan in 1.4. You can still get a purple rarity Arcalis by reforging it at a high level. If you look at Thrown Powder, you might realize that it updates blocks as it spreads outwards, and that it rapidly updates blocks that it is in contact with. An item with 4.01 to 6 knockback is considered average, while 3.01 to 4 is weak and 6.01 to 7 is strong. It's not that far apart. The Extractinator is called the Silt Extractinator when it's hovered over on the minimap. The Bestiary entry for Prismatic Lacewings only refers to the existence of the Nighttime Empress, even though daytime does exist. More curiously, it also refers to the Empress as a tyrant. Who does she oppress? The light? The internal name for the Celestial Starboard is Long Rainbow Trail Wings, which does accurately describe the wings. The 3DS achievement Challenge Accepted, which unlocks when you enter hard mode, has a sprite that is off-center. If you look closely at the Extractinator, you can see that this right gear is driving this reciprocating mechanism, or at least so it seems. The two do seem to be making contact. The Stardust Dragon itself is made of 4 different projectiles, with parts 2 and 3 repeated to increase the length of the dragon as you add more minion slots. All 3 spiked slime spikes face different orientations, though all share 4 spikes. Of the 4 emblems in the game, the Sorcerer emblem is the weirdest. All the other 3 clearly show something on them, but I have no clue what this blob thing is. If anyone knows, please tell me. In Terraria, the game is in permanent summer. This is shown in the timing, with one day being from 4:30 AM to 7:30 PM, or 15 hours long. Living wood walls were originally crafted near existing living wood, using it as a crafting station. This was changed in 1.2.3, using a living loom instead. The progression of the Old One's army staves go from rod to cane then staff, increasing in power. The summon damage for the Stardust Dragon scales linearly, based on the formula damage times 1.69 plus 0.46 times length minus 1. The Toxic Sludge, Hop and Jack, Baby Slime, and Gastropod are the only slimes with faces. Pinky and the Golden Slime have the lowest knockback resistance in the game, at negative 40% on Classic, negative 26% on Expert, and negative 12% on Master. Both the Snowflinks and Slimer, the next most knockbackable enemies, still have knockback resistance in Master mode, even if it is just 4 and 12%. One Yaomen projectile can cause up to 5 sounds that can ricochet 4 times, exploding on the final time. This makes it one of the loudest weapons in use, possibly also due to its very loud sound. It rivals that of the Stellar Tune and Vortex Beater. The Antline's legs used to be only 1 pixel thick, giving it a much more crude look. Of all the weapons that use illegal gun parts, the Sand Gun is the only one which actually uses them on its sprite. The muzzle and pistol grip are clearly visible, even in the original colors. The minimum depth Tim can spawn at is very weirdly determined. It takes the depths of the boundary between the underground and cavern and the depth of the absolute bottom of the underworld, then adds them up and divides by 2. This makes his minimum depth inconsistent between worlds, but in general, the lower caverns are where you can find him. The Warmth Potion has an effect on reflected projectiles from cold-themed weapons like the Frost Staff and North Pole, but the effect doesn't apply when used in PvP. The Sickle and the weapons Ice Sickle and Death Sickle have a different shape, with the latter looking more like a scythe. The Seed Ammunition has been steadily buffed over time, going from 1 damage in 1.2 to 3 in 1.3 and 4 in 1.4. It's still utter trash though, just use a Poison Dart. Clay Pots are 20% more expensive to craft in 1.3 compared to 1.4. The Lawn Mower always does 8 damage on contact with enemies. The Hungry make different sounds when dying in their first and second phases of existence. The Hook of Dissonance resembles a kunai, which is actually a stabbing weapon. Real-life kunai are sometimes attached to a rope like shown here, but they aren't used as grappling or throwing implements. The Avenger emblem used to be drawn with weird lighting before 1.3.1, leaving it with this weird shadow in the top left. Interestingly, the golden slime enemy found in Celebration Mark 10 Worlds drops less coins post-Plantera than before. Of course, it still drops the most coins of any enemy in the game. Flower boots are of lime rarity, but the upgrade fairy boots is a lower rarity of pink. That's a whole 2 rarity levels lower than lime. In 1.2.3, the destroyer probe drop rate was halved from 100 to 50%. The magic missile sprite has been updated twice. It was originally purple, and then we made it shiny in 1.2. The old flame lash sprite looks more similar to the original magic missile sprite, and even that has been changed now. While the magic quiver doesn't have a strap on it, both of its upgrades, the stalker quiver and the molten quiver, do. The game uses the word evolve in referring to the growing up of the alien larvae to alien hornets, then alien queens. It's a technically weird word to use, so I guess they've become Pokemon. The Heliophobia achievement in regards to the garden gnome is a play on how they petrify when exposed to the sun, as heliophobia means fear of the sun. What's more interesting is that the garden gnomes even petrify during a solar eclipse. Safe Man's Blanket Cape and Eurazer's Spell possibly have the smallest sprites of any wings in the game, making them both rather discreet. The fastest you can pass time in Terraria is 120 times the normal rate, which is done by sleeping in a bed while speeding up time 24x using Journey Mode. The normal 1442nd day can be passed in just 12. The gold worm is apparently extremely attractive to fish. Now we know that the Terrarian fish are attracted to the smell of gold. Finally, the rarest mobs in priority on the Lifeform Analyzer are the Biomimics, followed by regular mimics, the Prismatic Lacewing, and the Truffleworm.